feel that they are alive and well. I feel that I'm an upstanding person in my community. I am a law-abiding person, but there are times where I'm conscious of what I put on when I go and hang out at night. There are sometimes I'm conscious about where I drive, about how I speak to an officer. My father was an officer, so he's taught me some things on how to conduct myself so that way I am better equipped to deal with certain types of situations, but not everyone has that training. But even when I'm trying to be calm and enjoy myself, I know that at any moment something can happen.
I've witnessed racial profiling secondhand, while not firsthand, but I've had to hail a cab for black men before because the cab driver would stop for a black woman but wouldn't stop for a black man. And I've seen it happen. And I've had so many guys that I didn't even know come up to me and say, "Sweetie, could you grab a cab for me? Could you help me get this cab?"
Racial profiling is a very difficult subject to talk about. But I have to admit that we, unfortunately, not the majority, but I think enough of us, have created some circumstances and contributed to it that has made many people leery. I'm not even talking about the white folk being leery, I'm talking about many of the black folk being leery. So when we see certain things, we do wonder whether I'm going to be safe in that spot, or is somebody doing something or about to do something that is going to happen near me in my presence or that I might witness. And we want to kind of put some distance between us. But I think that that whole concept, though, has been misused, because when you put that in the hands of a law enforcement officer, many of them who are trained, of course, to look out for certain characteristics as to whether an event is going to happen or these people are up to no good, oftentimes they just look at a group of black young men and decide that they're up to no good, and they racially profile them. That's what happened to us when 1964, I told you about, in Baltimore. We were a bunch of college guys, Omega Psi Phi. Some of us had on fraternity paraphernalia, purple and gold. And in that group, we had, there were about 8 of us, we had engineers, we had doctors, future engineers, future doctors. I'm a judge, a future judge. And one of my fraternity brothers later became the president of Howard University, Dr. Swigert. I don't know if he was with us that night, but we might have had a university president there. But we were all profiled, and there was no reason to profile us except for our color.
There are some people that really fall into the category and need to be profiled, and then there are so many that should not. But for those that are innocent, they can still get a bad rap just for being at a certain place or wearing a hoodie or anything, and it really isn't fair. But what do we do?
My experience growing up in North Carolina, when the sales clerk completely dismissed me because of my attire, and it was very interesting to me because I recall her being very attentive to me when I was in a suit and a tie. So when I went back and I wasn't dressed in my suit and tie, I was in a Bojangles shirt and khaki slacks, I realized maybe there's more to it than the color of my skin. Maybe there's something called class that plays a huge role as well. I still feel that racial profiling happens. Unfortunately, it's not something that happens just externally of our own race. I see it happening African Americans to African American. If a person is dressed a certain way, we seem to treat them with a higher level of respect than those that are not dressed in a more business attire.
Racial profiling, I think, is something that exists. I think it will always exist. It's very disappointing. It's very disappointing to know that just because I'm a black man, could be pulled over or treated a certain way when I've done nothing wrong.
I feel like the issues for racial profiling, it's real. Even though I've never, I cannot say that I've personally felt racially profiled. But just because I haven't experienced it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist.
Racial profiling is always going to be in place as long as we live in a racist society.
I remember back in the mid-'80s, I was living in Columbia, Missouri, not far from where I grew up. And I was standing on a bus stop. My car had broken down. I was standing at the bus stop waiting for the bus to come. Another individual, black guy, walked up to me and asked if I had a cigarette. He struck up a conversation with me, and then the police car pulls up. The police get out of the car and ask us both to get in the car. As it turns out, the individual who walked up to me, and I shared with the police officers, I don't know this person. He asked for a cigarette, I gave him a cigarette. The assumption was these two black guys were doing things around the church, and therefore they were in the process of about to vandalize the church.
I think the racial profiling that goes on and still does go on today is just another example of how blacks and Hispanics are devalued in this country. And I think it's a shame.
You know, unfortunately, it's one of the things that being black, you're just so used to. You go to certain stores or certain areas and you just know when you're being watched more closely than others in the store.
During my time as a police officer, we didn't use the term racial profiling. We did it, but we didn't use the term. And my particular attitude toward that is somewhat different, because being in an environment with I'll say a criminal element is not that we were profiling per se, but if we deemed that this particular individual or group on a regular basis, anyone that looked like that particular group or person, we automatically assume that they were a criminal element.
It is unfortunate. I think everybody at some point in time in their life has experienced racial profiling. Me, myself, slightly, but I have. I use clever ways of getting out of it, but it's unfortunate and it still exists.
For you to be just racially profiled just because you're a black man that can't get a cab, I think that's absolutely crazy. It's odd to me that that people still think that way.
I kind of have a thing that sometimes a race brings it on themselves. If you're categorized as a certain race and you feed into that race of what they think you are, you're going to be categorized and you're going to be racial profiled.
But I really think it's just learned behavior. I think it's just things that are passed down from generation to generation. You know, the way that we're raised, like if your parents are racist, then sometimes it makes it easier for you to be racist because that's all you know, and it depends on where you're from. I'm from a major city, and I live in a major city now where, you know, it's a lot of black people that do very well. So it's very odd for me when I visit other towns that it's just kind of like, okay, it seems like people are still struggling a little bit. I don't get that. You know, like the black people seem a little bit more behind. I don't understand that. I think it's just the demographic and just where you live, you know, that kind of affects your livelihood or the way that you are perceived as a black person.
I can't say that I have ever been literally racially profiled because I've not been pulled over. But I can say that you get that impression if you walk in a store sometimes and you obviously feel people following you or watching you.
I've been racially profiled before. One of the schools I went to a private university in Pennsylvania, and the ratio was predominantly white, and the area was predominantly white, and it was a very affluent area. So when we would go out, a lot of times, you know, sometimes I would be looked at a little bit more than like going out with a lot of my white friends. In particular, one time I was like in a store and the woman assumed that I didn't have any money to buy a certain item, and she kept reminding me how much money it cost. And instead of just buying it to prove to her that I had money, I just decided to walk out, because why am I going to support somewhere where you're constantly telling me that I don't have any money?
I'm sure I have been, because I have gone places and I've seen the movements of other people as if they are looking to say, let's watch this guy to see if he's going to shoplift. My son has had it happen to him many times. He's 35 years old, and he's gone into stores, and he and I look pretty much alike, and he has said he's noticed movements and whispering, and people sort of putting this a little bit out of reach and nudging each other. And I've seen the same thing. I know they're watching. It doesn't happen so much now that I'm older, but when I was young, it was more readily observable.
I am racially profiled. I think we all are. However, I try to be the pioneer to extinguish ignorance, where just because of something that I'm wearing or my complexion, I try to divide the stereotypes, letting people know that everyone's not the same. So I think it's something that we can work on. However, it does, in a sad way, still exist.
When I was much younger, what happened during a summer in Greensboro, North Carolina was probably as close to a racial profile kind of a situation. And that's when a group of students had come to work with us during the summer in a training program. And it was the end of the program, and we wanted to celebrate that program. And we were offered a cabin at a lakeside in Greensboro, North Carolina by one of the white ladies that was familiar with the program. And we were there and having a good time and playing music and dancing and eating, and a couple of pickup trucks arrived. At that time, the adults in the cabin who were from Greensboro said to those who were from the north, "Let us handle this." And when the white men came in and demanded, who are you and what are you doing here and why are you here, we knew instantly, what was going on. And that was affirmed the next day when a cross was burned on the lady's property. That is an instance of racial profiling very early in my life, is the way I would term that.
I have been racially profiled, of course, and when I am aware of it, I leave that establishment. I simply do not choose to do business with people who are targeting me or people who look like me. You're supposed to be in business to do business to make money, regardless of who is coming into your establishment.
I was in high school, and there was a high school break-in, and if anyone has ever known me in high school, I was a shy, quiet, shy, smaller person who wouldn't harm a fly. But I remember when I was pulled in the principal's office, then taken to the police station, all they said was they had a description that fit me, and all of a sudden I was thrust in the spotlight, and it hurt my feelings because I've always been that kid that tried to do right. And I realized it was where I was from. I was in Louisiana, a small town where when you say black, that puts everybody, dark skin, light skin, short, tall, fat, thin, medium, round, long. We were all put in the same box.
I've had police officers follow me and run my tag. I don't know what they did. I didn't always get pulled over, but when I passed, for some reason, they get behind me and it's like, okay, what is he up to? Let's follow him for a little while and see what's going on. And that has happened. That's happened to me more than once.
I might have been racially profiled before. I just haven't felt it.
I grew up in a little Polish town called Hamtramck. And at the time, there weren't very many blacks, and it was a small town. But because there were so few, we could have been discriminated against but didn't realize it. I mean, it was just a few of us, so we were just in with the mix.
If it has happened, or when it has happened, I didn't know about it.
I remember exactly where I was. I remember watching the television, edge of the seat, anticipation.
Sitting in my great-grandmother's house.
My whole family was sitting in the living room, watching and waiting and hoping.
I was at a friend's house.
That was one of the happiest days of my life.
I cried. I didn't think I'd ever see it.
I don't know that I've ever been quite that excited. It's like, look, y'all, we have a black president. I was amazed. I was amazed and proud that I voted, and, proud that he got that office and got it again. It was a wonderful thing.
Tears of joy. Never thought I'd have tears of joy. I mean, I think you get stuff when you get married or birth of a child, but this was different.
Overjoyed. I felt like this was a once in a lifetime thing for me, for the world, but for me personally, I can't put into words how absolutely happy I was and that my grandmother lived to see an African American president.
I was standing in front of the television in disbelief, in awe as the votes came in.
When the news came that he was elected, we just stood up and cheered and ran out of our house, and the whole neighborhood was just alive and jumping with happiness because it is a big deal.
I called my grandmother, and the first thing I said was, "You get to see your first black president," and she was crying on the phone. That was joy enough for me.
And I remember when they finally said he won, because it was a very, very tight race, the first race. And we celebrated, but then we kind of stopped because it was so profound that we kind of had this loss of breath moment. And I remember watching the screen and seeing Oprah Winfrey crying on a strange white man's shoulder. And it was this moment of, wow, now I can dream a little bigger, because I don't think we ever had the thought of being president. So now, because he's president, we can think a little bigger now. I can tell my kids, hey, look, I've had a president in my lifetime. So whatever you think, I want you to think as big and as bold and as bright as you can.
It was an unbelievable but very proud, very, very proud moment. And there was hope in my heart that America was truly, truly changing.
I remember being overjoyed and thinking how much progress, and and not just because he was a black man, but just because he seemed like a great man, but especially because he was a black man.
With 5 generations of Loftons and Stancils, watching the announcement that America had voted in the first African American president. And it is really phenomenal, and I want to make sure that we are crystal clear how I phrased that. When America voted for the first African American president. A lot of times we put terms out there, the African American community, but really it's the community. Watching America come together to vote the best candidate who was smart, intelligent, who had a track record for making things better, who happened to be an African American male.
So long we've waited for action to be taken, for someone to come out of the woodwork and say, hey, look, we all know we could do it, but we actually did.
It was a wow moment. Anytime I see President Obama or First Lady Michelle, whether it be on television or print or what have you, there's a wow moment. There's this feeling that comes over me it's a feeling of happiness, it's a feeling of joy, it's adulation, it's like, wow, he's the President of the United States. And that's one of those feelings that will stay with me forever and ever and ever.
It is something that I never thought in my lifetime I would actually see it. I think that's where the emotions came from. And once again, it did make me proud to be an African American.
To sit in a room full of my grandmother, I've been very fortunate to grow up with my mother, my grandmother, and my great-grandparents. So watching them share stories of things that they remember about their childhood, it was completely phenomenal for me that they were actually here and lived long enough to embody or to watch that announcement.
I don't think that Barack Obama got elected just because we just want to be able to say, oh, we got the first black president. I think it's great that it is a very smart man, aside from the fact that he's of color. But I definitely remember feeling so happy, and especially so lucky to be living in DC at the time that it happened, in the city, and just seeing everyone seemed so happy and overjoyed, and just people, I remember people celebrating in the streets. You know, that was so much fun to see, and I just feel so lucky to be able to be 80 years old one day and say to my kids or grandkids, you know what, I remember when it happened, I remember exactly what it was like. I will carry that memory with me forever.
Grandmother, she went through the rioting eras. She went through the cleaning of the floors. She went through she had to sit on the back of the bus. She was raised in the South, so she went through all of that. So as soon as he was elected, I think I had the phone in my hand, like, come on, last rating, come on. And I called her, and just hearing her, the happiness in her voice, that was happiness enough for me.
And I even remember the second time he was elected. I was already a student at Howard, and we all had a viewing party. It was almost the entire school. And as soon as the news came the second time, we all got up and cheered and walked out of the rooms and ran down to the White House. It's just a great experience. So great.
I thought more about how my grandmother, the elderly part of my family, on how they would feel about it, because it was something that they used to tell the kids, you know, if you do this, if you study hard, you too one day may become president. And we know they would tell us that, but you didn't really mean that, because that is never going to happen in this United States of America. And lo and behold.
I never thought I'd see an African-American president elected in my lifetime. And my big regret was that my father didn't live to see it. And what bothers me now, nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes. But I feel that, and he's made his share, but I feel that the establishment has been unfair. I feel that they have racially profiled him, because everything he does, there's somebody, Tea Party, Republican particularly, they're going to try to trip him up any way they can. This business about, we are dedicated to making him a one-term president. It's just a fluke that he got elected. Well, guess what? We had two flukes. It was no fluke in the first place. And they are doing everything they can to undermine him. And now, of course, since they haven't been able to defeat his re-election, they're trying to do everything they can to keep him from accomplishing anything. And then after he's gone from office, I'm sure there'll be a concerted effort to abolish Obamacare, and there'll also be attempts to besmirch his accomplishments in office. I'm very proud of Barack Hussein Obama, and I will continue to support him. And if he stumbles, I will be one of those emotionally, psychologically, to be the first to help him up and say, right on, brother. I feel as though we've come a long way, but boy, have we got a long way to go. And my long is long, because discrimination, overt discrimination that necessitated the civil rights movement, the pickets, the sit-in demonstrations, all of that, those brought about a reversal of a standard practice of discrimination, overt discrimination. But the problem is reaching the covert, the subjective. You can't legislate people's attitudes. You have to be able to work on those attitudes and get them to see over time that you have a worth, that you have a value, that you know something, you can do something, you can lead something.
It saddens me that we live in what is the greatest country in the world, and that African Americans are still treated much the same as they were 40 years ago.
I said things have changed from the 60s up to now, but then again, it really hasn't changed that much at all.
I still feel sad, very, very sad, deep sadness, deep confusion. Just can't understand how people could blatantly do harm, even lynch and kill people just for their skin color, something that they had no dealings with whatsoever, no choice. It's still sad to me when I look back to see how African Americans were treated. It's sad to say that some of that stuff still exists, and there are people out there that actually still feel the same hatred that some of our ancestors felt back in the 50s and 60s.
Just the sheer magnitude of how far people went to show their distaste or hatred. it's almost mind blowing. And what I did for myself, and it was kind of shock therapy for me. I went and I looked at pictures of lynching online. It was very profound for me because anyone who knows me knows I don't like those type of pictures. It's very moving. But I had to thrust myself into the reality of that's what it looks like, and that every person that was hurt was attached to a family. It may have been someone's mother, brother, sister, father, uncle, cousin, grandparent. There was always someone else attached to that pain. So the wounds cut deep, and then those stories are passed on through generations that not only fuel hate but fuel fear.
The overt discrimination that existed in the 60s, I believe, is carried forth to today to a very great extent. I think the difference that we have is we may not have as many overt situations as the KKK coming in to ask you questions about what you're doing and why are you here. But we still have some barriers. We still have some vigilante groups that feel that they're privileged, and so it's changed. You know, they just have suits on.
The meanness and the intensity to which the whites were abusing the blacks in the 60s was just, I don't know. I just can't fathom that people would do that to others simply because of the color of their skin. That you could just hate somebody who's just trying to have the same rights as you have, the basic rights that you have. That you feel it is your right to stop a whole group, a race of people from progressing, living the same life that you live, to have the same things that you have. It's the hatred. The strength of the blacks who endured that. I admired those blacks who endured that and who overcame the hardship.
First of all, it makes me feel fortunate. Fortunate that my ancestors, some of whom are still living, had to go through those things and persevered through those things so that I can have all that I have today, so that I don't have to, risk my life trying to go to the same schools as other people. So it makes me feel fortunate, and it makes me feel young.
Well, I'm from Louisiana, so it is 2013, and I still go back home, and sometimes the older relatives still refer to the Caucasian as the white man. And all you have, but you don't go, on that part of town because the white people. I don't even think that way, but I understand why they think that way.
Things have changed, but things haven't changed.
My heart goes out to those people, if they are still alive. I'm hoping that they're seeing that, everything that they did and everything they fought for wasn't in vain, and that the people that fought for them, what they did wasn't in vain either. I just think it would be so amazing if, like, Martin Luther King could come back and see where we are right now. Maybe he's looking down, seeing something, but, I just think they would be so proud of us and so proud that we have, that black people and white people can get married and walk down the street together, and, black people are owning businesses and houses and major corporations, and we have a black president. Like, I just think they would be so proud of and they should be, of themselves, and just so proud of society and black people as a whole, of what we have been able to accomplish.
Learning about racial discrimination as recently as today, it makes me a little sad, because I want to believe that as a society that we've progressed since, the 1950s and 60s. And I mean, in a sense we have, but we still have work that needs to be done. But I think that the thing now, what is needed most is unity amongst each other. I feel like a lot of times back in the 1950s and 1960s, we were oppressed, but a lot of times we were very supportive of one another. We were supportive of black businesses, we were supportive of our neighborhoods, and just uplifting one another. And I think now there's kind of a divide between African Americans in some communities.
In the back of my mind, it makes me feel sick to my stomach as to what they went through. But I don't really too much have a feeling about it now, because if I did, it would have such control over me if I let what happened affect me. They say, you just got to think about it, marinate, and move on.
We have not given up, and we cannot give up. And we have got to encourage our young people to go to college, or if they don't go to college, to go into some subject where they can get a profession in training, technical trade, to be prepared to assume the leadership in every phase of American life. Because we have to convince not only them, but ourselves that it's worth it. And buckle down and realize that nothing is easy. And when they talk about it's too hard, no, it's not too hard. You just have to refocus. So this is what I think our race has got to do. And we have not come to enough terms with ourselves. Anytime, I've heard statistics, and this one may not be accurate, but when they say there are more blacks in jail than there are in colleges and universities, whether it's true or not, it does have a value because it tells you what we as a group are doing. And so when we talk about caste and class, we are creating a greater divide within our own race because some are moving on up and others are just groveling at the bottom. And that's something that we have got to work on changing. That's where these corporations can come in talking about social action programs to really get the bottom to move them up.
As a African-American man getting close to 50, I kind of feel that promised land a little bit. I mean, we don't live in a perfect world. That promised land that Martin Luther King spoke about, we're almost there. We're closer than we've ever been, I'll say that. But for me personally, life is good, No one treats me bad, so that promised land is closer than we think.
Listening to Martin Luther King's speeches over and over again, referring to or making reference to the promised land where he wanted to see his children and his daughters being able to walk hand in hand with their friends, I do not feel that that statement was just meant for the African American community.
As a people, I don't think we've reached the promised land that Martin Luther King spoke of.
The ugly head of racism has not gone anywhere. It's only changed its appearance.
I believe there's lots more work that needs to be done.
I think the promised land that Martin Luther King spoke of is a long way off in the distance.
I don't know if we're there just yet.
I do believe we have a ways to go. I do believe that there are great leaders that can still direct us in the path in which we need to go. We still have a lot of work to do.
It reminds me, I guess, of when the promised land, in the Bible in Deuteronomy, where Moses had a vision of the promised land, but he wasn't necessarily there to see it fall through. And now that we're here, it's up to us to lead us forward. We're here, we've arrived, but I think there's still a whole bunch of work that needs to be done.
The promised land that was spoken for us, I think, is in our grasp. I think that we have every opportunity to take advantage of it and to do justice by what Dr. Martin Luther King not only predicted but proclaimed for us.
In the African American community, we've made wonderful progress. We've come a mighty long way. I do feel that we are on the road to the promised land, but the promised land does not happen when we have gotten to a certain point. It's when all of us, all ethnic backgrounds, all different races are treated equally and across the board. So no, I do not feel that we have reached the promised land, but I do think that we're on the road to get there.
The fact that there are no limitations on what we can do, I feel like the only limitations that we have are the ones we put on ourselves. There's no law saying that we can't do something, that we can't get married, or we can't own a business, or that we can't be whatever we want to be. So in that aspect, maybe we are at the promised land.
Halfway there, but not completely there.
I think that it's our duty to say, this is our roadmap. He gave us simple roadmaps as to how to go about that. But sometimes we take 5 steps forward, someone knocks us back 2 steps. But he expected that. But he expected us to keep fighting in the right way, because when you fight the right way, you have less regret. You have nothing to stand down for if you're standing for the right thing.
Are sometimes going backwards with the things that we do and how we portray ourselves, or how we are being portrayed in the media and on television and in public. I believe that we're going backwards. I believe that we're focusing too much on sometimes material wealth instead of teaching our kids how to be better human beings and how to present themselves in society in a productive manner.
I don't know if racism will ever not exist, but it's so funny because we're such a melting pot of people. You know, it's who is 100% anything anymore.
I don't think that we should ever view ourselves as going towards one goal, that we should get to this promised land and just chill there.
As times change and we evolve with modern technology, there has to be more great leaders to step up like Martin Luther King. But overall, I think his vision, I think he's smiling. You can never get 100%, but I think we're pretty close to the vision in which he set his sight towards.
And I think until there's no more poverty, until there's no more discrimination, I think that promised land is still yet to be attained.
I think that we should always be motivated and always be striving for something. And if we reach the equality that we are searching for, I think that we should try to help other people reach it too. People in other countries, people in other cities who don't have the rights that we have. Once we get ourselves to the promised land that we're thinking of, we need to move forward past that and help other people get there as well.
I think we can see it, but there's some obstacles. The same thing I just said about answering the question about education, goal setting, values, economic development, family life. I should have said that first. We've got to get these fathers. I'm working with the Fatherhood Initiative of my fraternity. We have to get these fathers to step up to the plate. We have to get these mothers to be more motherly and focus on their children's well-being. We have to remember that the grandparents, the cousins, the aunts, the uncles, the elders, and people who are like family but not necessarily your blood, we have to get these communities functioning again. When we live in these isolated situations where you move here and you don't know a soul, the folks back home may be your rock and salvation, but we've got to form relationships where we are with new people if necessary. I think this is the way that we can really move ourselves forward.
I think that the promised land he spoke of, I think we might never get to it, because I think that as we go further and further, there will always be a mountain to climb. There will always be another peak to reach. And I think that's kind of beautiful.
Okay, where do I look?
I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry.
To the camera that's at your left.
That's at my left?
Yeah.
That one?
You see it?
Yes.
Please let me say that again.
Okay, that too.
I was on my way to the plantation. Oh, okay, boss. Oh, boss.
I appreciate it. That's why I love you.
No problem.
All right.
See, that's what you're gonna hear on camera.
Thank you. I like that slogan. Blacks are popular demand.
Put some makeup on and fix your hair and put something nice on before you leave out. Cause
You know, once again, I tightened this little Saturday for you.
Okay. So who's in there with them?
Nobody.
Oh, through Jesus.
That was very good.
No, thank you. Trust me. Very, very helpful.
Thank you. I'm sorry if I messed up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. All edited and chopped and
Going out live right now.
whatever VOG.
We did that last time. Change the cameras.
Well, only just kind of like to break up the monotony of you just looking the same.
Okay.
Some of the questions I was like, huh?
You did great.
Guess who I saw today, Monday?
Hi, I'm Ernest Collins, and I forgot the word.
I love my apartment.
Everybody be trying to live for my shirt.
Black by popular. I'm kidding. I don't know.
But it really wasn't very far.
And then it occurred to me
Where I had
when I had
parked
parked
the car.
there was this most attractive French cafe and wing joint. That was really good.
Thank
I
you.
thought you were going to tear up for a minute there.
I was.
People that cry.
Excuse me. Oh, what happened? I burped on you?
Like your head is moving. You didn't know it either.
Only the baby can be on the lap. Yes.
No, I don't see anything. Yeah, I see it now. Okay.
Justin, you got to smile for the camera, okay, sweetie?
Look, I'm just as much white as I am black. All right.
And better, excuse me.
My name is Carla Miller.
Wait. Let me stop talking first.
Okay.
Okay, go ahead.
My name is Carla Miller, and I am black by popular demand.
Wash me in the water, wash me in the water. Ooh. Wash me in the water, wash me in the water. A man came down from Galilee. Wash me in the water. Somebody said he'd save me. In the water. I fell to my knees and prayed.